and welcome back to another episode of The Greatest Show in the Galaxy, the show where I, the curator, discuss my personal favorite show of all time, personal favorite franchise of all time, Doctor Who. And before we get started with today's topic, which will be the continuation of Companions Month, as I like to call it, there is a bit of an oopsie that I've made last week on the show. As you know, every week I try to open the episode of the show, highlighting and mentioning a birthday of someone closely associated with the production of Doctor Who, either an actor, a writer, a production person, etc. And well, last week there were a couple of them, including an unfortunate tragic passing of one. But in all the commotion, I somehow missed one of them, and I would like to correct that mistake this week. Because while last week I mentioned that March 11th was the birthday of the wonderful and amazing Miss Alex Kingston, it was also the birthday of the one, the only John Barrowman, also known as Captain Jack Harkness. I have no idea how could I possibly have missed that. I didn't even know they were born on the same day, just a year or two apart, I think. So, that was, like I said, a major oopsie. Captain Jack is one of my personal favorite characters in all of Doctor Who. He's definitely an S-tier companion in my book, and I definitely did fought hard for him to be in the S-tier of companions video that we did a couple of months ago with myself, Ben, and Soda, and Kiwi. And it's always great when Captain Jack comes back. He, of course, obviously has run into 3 different Doctors thus far, with the 9th Doctor being his first, then the 10th Doctor several times, and he did have a couple of runnings with the current Doctor, the 13th Doctor, Jodie Whittaker, and it would be great to see him back, maybe in Jodie's final story, maybe in during the 14th Doctor's story. He has become a much bigger character in Torchwood ever since, obviously being the star of his own spin-off show, Torchwood, and also the various Torchwood-related audio Big Finish episodes, which are still going on today, by the way. Just wanted to point that out. He also has had several different adventures with River Song herself. So, it would be great to see Captain Jack on screen again. And maybe, just maybe, I don't know if the screens can handle it, but Captain Jack and River Song having having their own episode of the show. I know they did it in Big Finish, and I know they technically ran into each other in the Arrowverse, but it would be great to see that in Doctor Who in live action. Now, switching back to this week we also had a couple of people having their birthdays again on the same day, which is weird how these things continue to happen. Starting us off, we have Miss Aisling B. She's probably the most recent person that we will be discussing as far as birthday highlights in the Whoniverse. She recently appeared in the most recent episode and most recent New Year's special, Eve of the Daleks, as the character Sarah. And I've said this on this very show myself. Personally, not a fan of the Eve of the Daleks. It's my least favorite Dalek story, which isn't saying much because I love pretty much all Dalek stories, but I was not a fan of that episode, and her character in particular was a big part of that, but still nothing to take away from the actress herself. Yeah, the actress, I believe, did the job perfectly. The way the character was written, it was just, again, the Chris Chibnall way of writing characters that I was not a fan of in that particular episode. However, I don't want to leave you on this downer street, as I say, because we also have another person who had their birthday on March 16th, the same day that Aisling B had her birthday. This man, and again, not to overshadow the female birthday with the male's birthday, but this man has contributed so much to Doctor Who, and it's so fitting that we are discussing him on this week, which is still part of Companions Month, a month where we talk about the greatest companions. This man's contribution even outshadows Captain Jack Harkness's contribution to the franchise himself. And I'm, of course, talking about the one, the only, the man, the myth, the legend, John Leeson, also known as the voice of K9. Now, he's been the voice of K9 since the Tom Baker episode, The Invisible Enemy. And he still technically continues to voice the characters still to this day. He has continued to voice the character all throughout most of the remaining Tom Baker era. He also played him again in the pilot that never actually made it to full series, K9 Company. The episode was titled A Girl's Best Friend. He reappeared again in The Five Doctors, Dimensions in Time, and also he returned as the K9 Mark III and K9 Mark IV for School Reunion, and then later on went on to be Sarah Jane's to be a recurring character on the Sarah Jane Adventures, and he also had his own standalone series, which it's still questionable. Jury's still out if it is in fact canon with the Doctor Who universe. It's not 100% quite clear. The rights to K9 himself, the character that is, have always been kind of a bit of a murky waters as far as the BBC is concerned. Spoiler alert, that's part of the main reason why John Leeson did not voice K9 for his second season. The second season he had, the character had with Tom Baker. Actually, no, not the second season, the third season that K9 had with the fourth Doctor. He was voiced by a different actor. Can't remember the name of them at the moment, but then John Leeson fought really hard for K9 to get his own spin-off show, which the BBC did not allow. So I'm not 100% sure on the details. Probably this is a topic worthy of its own episode one day, but there was a K9 show in 2010, I believe, featuring John Leeson as K9 for BBC Australia, because apparently that was the only network that agreed to take on the property. Side note, that's also why K9 wasn't featured quite as prominently in the Sarah Jane Adventures as people might have hoped. He only became a regular recurring character until the third or fourth season of that show. So, thank you, John Leeson. Belated happy birthday to Mr. John Barrowman. And also thank you, Aisling B, for being the most recent addition to the Doctor Who canon. Thank you, all three of you. We quite literally could not do this without you. Now, going into the topic of today, we'll be discussing what I like to call the missing companions, the unknown companions, the obscure companions. Some of you may remember that about a month ago, I also did the same for what I like to call the obscure Doctors, the Doctors, or rather the actors who have played the Doctor in various other media that you probably never even heard about, never even known about. Obviously, we've covered The Curse of Fatal Death Doctor. We've covered the War Doctor and Eighth Doctor in greater lengths. We talked about some Big Finish exclusive Doctors, some other versions and variations of the Doctor. Now, we will be discussing companions that have not really got their chance to shine on the show itself. Specifically, we will be discussing companions from Doctor Who comic books, Doctor Who novels, and also, as you may have guessed it, Doctor Who Big Finish episodes. And who better to start than, the original, you might say, Joan and Gillian. I believe those are their names. I did try my best to handpick companions from each individual Doctor. Wasn't really quite the case for all of them, but John and Gillian are, as far as I understand it, they are the first Doctor's nephews. It's never really explained if they are actual Time Lords, if they are Gallifreyans, if they are for some reason nephews of a person that he had children with on Earth. It's never quite explained. This is still back in the very, very, very early days of Doctor Who, when the character of the Doctor wasn't quite as well defined as it is today. There was still so much mystery surrounding this character, the least of which is these two characters, John and Gillian. They have appeared in Doctor Who comic books, and in comic TV strips in Doctor Who magazine. Without Susan, which is a bit of an interesting bit, the first Doctor has traveled and had certain adventures with John and Gillian, his quote-unquote nephews, without his quote-unquote granddaughter, Susan. And also, John and Gillian share names with two other characters from another novel, or rather novella, the Doctor Who, which is sort of a prequel in a way to An Unearthly Child / 100,000 BC. Now, I apologize, I don't remember the name of the novella at the moment, but reading it, it kind of explains why the TARDIS specifically crash landed in the junkyard I.M. Foreman at 76 Taunter's Lane when it did, and why the chameleon circuit broke at that moment. So I highly recommend looking at. Again, I apologize, I cannot remember the name of it, but I will do my best to look it up, and I will put it in the comment section of this very same video once it debuts, provided, of course, it debuts on time. Now, next we have Jeremy Fitz-Oliver, and before we actually move on to him, something I forgot to mention is John and Gillian have also traveled several times with the second Doctor, and according to my research, I did do some research on these companions. I couldn't find companions from other media like comics, novels, and the like that have traveled exclusively with the second Doctor, other than John and Gillian. So I apologize. Maybe there's something I've missed, but as far as I know, the only companions that have traveled with the second Doctor are the ones we have seen on television, namely Ben, Polly, Jamie, Zoe, and Victoria. Not necessarily in that order, but you get the gist. So Jeremy Fitz-Oliver, lost my place there, was a friend of Sarah Jane Smith during the later half of the third Doctor's era. He was a photographer at the exact same journalistic company, the Metropolitan, the newspaper that Sarah Jane Smith worked at the time. By the time she met the third Doctor, there was a certain period of time when the Doctor and Sarah Jane stopped traveling together. The Doctor was still hanging around UNIT for a few days, but him and Sarah Jane were, as they say, taking a bit of a break from traveling. And during that time, the Doctor was called back to UNIT several times over, and he was asked by the Brigadier to investigate certain things, and Jeremy Fitz-Oliver kind of helped him there. Helped him with that. Now, I apologize once again. The StreamYard did not allow me to upload the pictures themselves, but I will just say that Jeremy Fitz-Oliver has appeared alongside the third Doctor and Sarah Jane, as well as the Brigadier, in these such stories as The Paradise of Death and its spiritual sequel, The Ghosts of N-Space. So I believe I've only listened to The Ghosts of N-Space. I haven't listened to The Paradise of Death, which is a bit of a weird, wibbly-wobbly way of doing things out of order, but I really did enjoy The Ghosts of N-Space, and maybe I will do an episode about it one day. Or maybe I'll just do a two-parter with it and The Paradise of Death. So yeah, Jeremy Fitz-Oliver. Now, finally, a companion that I actually know pretty much all there is to know about. We have Sharon Davis. She appeared alongside the fourth Doctor in a series of TV comic strips. Now, a lot of people don't realize this, but during the late 70s, early 80s, there was a series of Marvel Comics strips featuring the fourth Doctor, which are technically still canon in the Marvel multiverse. So yeah, the fourth Doctor specifically is a part of the Marvel universe. The Marvel multiverse on Earth 5556, I believe. if I remember this correctly. But yeah, this featured the character of Sharon Davis. For the most part, Tom Baker's Fourth Doctor traveled alone during most of these comic books, but there was a small series of comics where he appeared alongside the character of Sharon Davis, who is still technically the first black companion of the Doctor, the first first person of color companion the Doctor has ever had, all the way back in the 1980s. Which, again, like I said, it's something that most people don't realize. It would only be about 2.5 decades after she made her debut in comic book form that the Doctor would have his first official person of color companion on television in the form of Mickey Smith, and later Martha Jones. Obviously, later on, there was the character of Bill Potts, Ryan Sinclair, and Yasmin Khan. But yeah, she was the first. She was technically still the first person of color companion to travel with the Doctor, and it was all the way back in the 80s. Now, it's been a while since I've read the comic. I still do have the comic books, specifically the ones that she appears in physical form. I have it in the back room of my apartment. But yeah, like I said, it's been a while since I've read them, but for as much as I can remember, she first appeared in a story called The Star Beast. Her and I can't remember if it was her brother or best friend. Like I said, it's been a while, but basically the Doctor saved her, and he also proceeded to save several other people. And remember, this is still during the randomizer era of the Doctor. A little bit of history lesson at the very end of the Quest for the Key to Time season of Doctor Who, when the Doctor and the first version of Romana were tasked by the White Guardian to scour the universe, to search all across the universe for pieces of the Key to Time. They succeeded and managed to keep the Key to Time far away from the clutches of the Black Guardian, who tried to acquire it at the time. The Black Guardian was really not satisfied with this whole ordeal, and he vowed that the Doctor would die for this, and that he would haunt him for the rest of his days. Which the Doctor then promptly constructed something called the randomizer, which he installed on his TARDIS. Basically, for lack of a better word, it's the randomizer. What it does is it randomizes the controls of the TARDIS. For lack of a better word, the TARDIS can quite literally land anywhere and everywhere. The Doctor had even less control over where he would land than he did have previously. Obviously, nowadays, in the modern era of the show, the Doctor can mostly pilot the TARDIS correctly, land wherever he wanted. Obviously, during the first and a little bit of the second Doctor's era, that really was not the case. The Doctor was just pressing buttons, hoping to land somewhere he wanted. But by the time that the third Doctor came along, and especially towards the end of his exile, the Doctor had, for the most part, full control over where the TARDIS would land, and definitely during the fourth Doctor. But once again, like I said, because of the Black Guardian, that really was not the case, because he was forced to construct the randomizer to ensure that even he did not know where the TARDIS would land, to make sure that the Black Guardian was not able to follow them wherever they would go. So the Doctor quite literally could have landed anywhere, anytime the TARDIS dematerialized and rematerialized anywhere else. During the Star Beast adventure, he was with Sharon in the TARDIS, trying to save a bunch of people, trying to defy the randomizer in a way by transporting certain people from one place to another, dematerializing the TARDIS in the process. And right before he tried to bring Sharon back to her proper time and place with her brother / best friend. Again, I don't remember the story quite that in detail, but they accidentally got taken away to a completely different place as a result of the randomizer, and she sort of became an unwilling companion of the fourth Doctor for a few stories before reaching a point later in her life where she, again, no spoilers, but she has aged a few years during her time with the fourth Doctor, and by the time they reached certain other adventures together, she decided that she was old enough to be her own woman and she decided to leave the Doctor and start a family with a person that she met on one of their adventures together. That one was Dreamers of Death was her final storyline in the comics. Now, very fairly recently, and when I say fairly recently, I mean what I mean is 2018. A actress by the name of uh, sorry, I apologize. I've never heard this name said out loud, so I'm just reading it off the screen. Rhiannon Starbuck, I hope I pronounced it correctly, was cast as the character of Sharon Davis. Sorry, that's a spoiler for Big Finish adaptations of those specific Tom Baker stories. She played obviously alongside the Fourth Doctor, Tom Baker. There it is, the cover of the Star Beast, their very first adventure together. So yeah, they basically took the entire comic books as themselves and adapted them into the Big Finish style of storytelling with the Fourth Doctor. So if you can't really find those comics, and I don't blame you, they're quite hard to find, especially nowadays. The stories themselves are available in their entirety on Big Finish, if Big Finish is more your speed. Now, sticking with Big Finish, one of my personal favorite Big Finish episodes I've ever listened to is Doctor Who Out of Time, and specifically the first episode. I haven't actually listened to the other two, but this one actually pits the 10th Doctor and the 4th Doctor together. This is, for context, this is during a time when the 10th Doctor was reaching the end of his life. It's definitely placed after the Dead Planet, sorry, Planet of the Dead, and sometime before the end of time. It's unclear whether it's before or after the Waters of Mars, but it's definitely somewhere in between the two. So the Doctor is still trying to get a few last adventures in before he regenerates into his 11th incarnation, which he believes would, at the time, would be his last. And he accidentally runs into the 4th Doctor and his companion at the time, a character by the name of Jorah. And the main reason I bring up this wonderful image of the 4th and 10th Doctor together is because there is no available image of the character Jorah from this story. As far as I know, this story is the only one she appears in with the 4th Doctor, but she's a really good companion, and her story does actually line up perfectly with the plot of this episode, which heavily involves the Daleks. Again, no spoilers, but it's a really good story, and you should definitely listen to it, for no other reason than just to hear the voices of David Tennant and Tom Baker together in the same episode. It's one of my personal favorite multi-Doctor stories. We're getting to another one in just a minute, or rather closer to the end of this episode, I should say, but it's definitely worth a listen. Now, jumping into the 5th Doctor set of companions, we have a character by the name of Aranim. She's an Egyptian princess, the daughter of Pharaoh Amenhotep II from the 14th century BC. And she actually did travel with the 5th Doctor and several other companions. I believe she also traveled with the 5th Doctor during the time when the 5th Doctor was still traveling with Perry. And for those of you who don't know, Perry officially on television only had 2 episodes alongside the 5th Doctor, unless you count Dimensions in Time as another one. But the 5th Doctor traveled with Perry in... she first appeared in Planet of Fire, and then she appeared next in The Caves of Androzani, the 5th Doctor's final story. However, in between Planet of Fire and... I'll take the picture off for a second. In between Planet of Fire and The Caves of Androzani, there's like a whole host of Big Finish adventures between the 5th Doctor and Perry, enough to fill in several different seasons of the show. But during that time, they also traveled alongside this character, Aranim. Like I said, she's an Egyptian princess, the daughter of a pharaoh, and I haven't actually listened to a lot of her. I believe I might have listened to an excerpt of one of her adventures with the 5th Doctor years ago. I'm afraid I'm all but forgotten what the story was about, but I do remember a few elements of her character specifically. First of all, even back then, the prospect of an Egyptian princess from ancient Egypt traveling alongside the Doctor really intrigued me. It's a shame I never actually went back to. I don't even remember what was the name of the episode itself that she appeared in, but the idea in and of itself of an Egyptian princess traveling with the Doctor really fascinated me. And right now, I'm slowly, emphasis on slowly, making my way through the monthly adventures of Doctor Who, which is just the basic adventures that featured all, or rather, not all the Doctors, but the fifth, sixth, and seventh Doctors. Eventually, I will catch up to when Erin eventually makes her debut and listen to some more stories with her. But from the little bit that I can remember listening to that story, whatever it was something I noticed about her that she has a certain Leela type attitude towards her. And what I mean by a Leela type attitude is that, yes, she comes from royalty, absolutely. She does. She is what many people would consider to be, by our standards, primitive, coming from such a long time ago. But from what I've heard of her, she doesn't really come off that way. She doesn't come off as primitive or savage. Well, sometimes she does. She just like Leela, she gets things done her own way when she needs to, but she never really carries herself with the air of a person of royalty. She doesn't. She's not spoiled, I guess is what I'm trying to say. She doesn't. She's not too commanding. In a way, she doesn't boss people around. She doesn't give orders. She doesn't think she's a princess. She doesn't tell the people what to do, and she doesn't throw a tantrum whenever things don't happen her way. She doesn't get angry when people don't listen to her. In other words, she doesn't Clara Oswald the Doctor, for lack of a better term. But she also is very firm, and she knows how to put her foot down when she needs to, and she knows how to stand on her own. She's very brave, confident, and intelligent, is what I can remember from the few minutes I've listened to from that episode, and I wish I knew which one it was. But then again, like I said, I will eventually get to it in all due time. Another companion that I would like to talk about, and a companion that I am thrilled to talk about finally, we have Frobisher. Yes, it's a penguin. Well, technically not necessarily a penguin, but I can't quite remember the name of his species at the moment. But yeah, he's a shape-shifting penguin from the 76th century. I think I can remember the very, very, very far future. He's an alien, obviously. He's a talking penguin that can shapeshift. I mean, what more could you want? He traveled a lot with the Sixth Doctor, and also a little bit with the Seventh Doctor. I believe he's a comics exclusive. He never appeared in Big Finish or in comic book form. Actually, no, wait. He might actually. Again, I don't know. I've only seen him in comics at this point. I haven't seen him in Big Finish. But yeah, just the idea and the concept of a shape-shifting alien penguin talking to the Doctor is just great. And he also played a major role in a comic book storyline that I will be discussing in a few minutes on this show. Stay tuned for that. Another companion that traveled with the Sixth Doctor and is slightly she was introduced in Big Finish, and she's quite the companion herself. She has become one of the major characters in Doctor Who mythology of all time. The character of Evelyn Smythe, voiced by Maggie Stubbles. I believe that's the proper name of the actress. As she first appeared in the Big Finish story, The Marian Conspiracy, alongside the Sixth Doctor, Colin Baker. She's sort of, again, for lack of a better word, sort of a better Clara. She was a mysterious enigma of a character. When the Doctor first encountered her, she has some mysterious things about her lineage that ties all the way back into the uh, 15th or 16th century of England. And the first episode, which I have listened to at this point, the Marian Conspiracy, ends, and her lineage is still a bit unknown by the end of that story. Haven't actually listened to the any of the other rest. Like I said, I'm making my way very slowly through the monthly adventures of Doctor Who. I'm listening to certain other Big Finish stuff at the moment, but uh, one story that I can't believe, I can't remember how it got into my hands at some point, but it's an episode involving Cybermen, and it heavily involves the Cyber Wars. Now, the Cyber Wars in Doctor Who is a massive, complicated event that is worthy of several episodes of the show. But all I'll say for now is the character of Evelyn Smythe has a certain part to play the in the Cyber Wars itself. But like I said, she's a better Clara in my opinion. She's a history teacher. So there, right off the bat, the similarities to Clara continue, but also she does actually boss the Doctor around at times. Except this time, she's a much older woman than Clara and much more authoritative. But at the same time, she's not a control freak. She's not too bossy. She can go from being bossy and commanding to a lovable, loving grandmother type character, which, ironically, in a way, that's what the first Doctor was when he first began. He went from being a grumpy, angry old man to a lovable, kind-hearted grandfather over the course of his season, especially considering that he traveled with his actual granddaughter, sort of, in his first few seasons. So this is basically the character of Evelyn Smythe in a nutshell. Now, the next character I would like to bring up, obviously, you can't really have a show focusing on companions that haven't appeared on the TV show itself without bringing this character, one of the biggest names in Doctor Who companions outside the show, obviously, but it's one of the biggest characters in Doctor Who of all time. And I'm, of course, talking about the one, the only, Bernice Summerfield. She first appeared alongside the Seventh Doctor in a series of the New Adventures novels, and the New Adventures novels is worth the read all on their own. After a certain point, I can't remember the exact year, but at some point, the BBC decided to just cut the fundings or rather, not renew the license for the Virgin novels, for Virgin to continue to produce Doctor Who fiction. And like I said, like with K9, this happens a lot when characters start off as part of the Doctor Who universe, and through a rights dispute between them and the BBC, they then move on to do other stuff not involving the Doctor. And in a way, the Virgin novels were not allowed to even mention the Doctor or anything connected to the Doctor Who universe in their novels, in a way, which kind of weird how these things happen. Like I said, with the K9 show, and also with the Peter Cushing movies, Terry Nation, the creator of the Daleks, did have the rights to make Dalek stories that aren't necessarily Doctor Who related, so he did about as close of a job as he could. But yeah, rights issues between Doctor Who and the BBC might actually be a topic for a full episode one day. But for now, talking about Bernice Summerfield, she was so popular in the Virgin novels of Doctor Who that she was, like I said, she was given her own standalone series of novels, the Bernice Summerfield Adventures, and also then she became a major player in Big Finish, obviously with receiving her own standalone series of Big Finish, which I believe has so far lasted for 9 seasons, something like that, on Big Finish. Some seasons alongside the Doctor and various other companions, some seasons on her own. Again, like I said, it's one of those characters whose affiliation with Doctor Who is a bit murky. But something that I would like to point out, though, is she also at some point became the mentor of River Song, Doctor River Song slash Professor River Song. She's basically like the inspiration for that character. She's an archaeologist from the future, traveling in time and uncovering certain mysteries. And does that remind you of anyone? It's basically the character of River Song. So anything involving Bernice Summerfield is highly, highly worth investigating. She traveled alongside the Seventh Doctor and a little bit of the Eighth Doctor, and it's a character that was able to cross between all forms of Doctor Who media, from novels to Big Finish to comics to pretty much anything else. And this is a massive, massive character, and I believe requires an episode onto herself just to discuss. Now, moving into the Doctor with, surprisingly enough, the biggest the biggest roster of companions out of all the Doctor, which is a bit odd because considering he had the least amount of screen time out of all the Doctors, it's sort of weird how these things happen with Doctor Who. But the Eighth Doctor, which only has appeared in a movie and a short mini episode to celebrate the 50th anniversary, the Eighth Doctor has too many companions to mention in just one video. And I've already skipped several of the other Doctors in companions. Obviously, I'm not going to be able to mention every single one of the companions that traveled with the Eighth Doctor, but I decided a bit of a compromise by only discussing the companions he specifically mentioned by name in his last scene as the Doctor, officially, in the Night of the Doctor, right before he drinks the goblet, which supposedly caused him to regenerate into his war incarnation. He mentions several companions by name, namely Charlie, Lucy, Chari, Curris, Lucy, Tamsin, Molly, and several of them I have been able to find connections right here, starting with Lucy Miller. This is a character that I do not know much about. However, I do contend I know more about this character than I do most of the other names mentioned by the Eighth Doctor in that scene. She first appeared in one of the very few Eighth Doctor stories that I actually listened to, Blood of the Daleks. And I believe I mentioned this story several times on this show, but I can't remember how or when, but this episode just showed up on YouTube like a couple of years ago, and I was able to listen to all of it in its entirety, the two-parter. And something that I do remember from that story is that Lucy Miller just mysteriously showed up on board the TARDIS with no seeming explanation at first, and later the Doctor and her were able to deduce that she was sent there by the Time Lords as part of what is now known as the Time Lord Witness Protection Program. It's believed that she witnessed a majorly special event that the Time Lords were trying to keep secret, but the problem is she can't quite remember what it was. So they sent her to the Doctor to look after her, and that she would look after him, hoping that one day they will be able to uncover the secret. But like I said, I only listened to one story, Blood of the Daleks. It was years and years ago. I don't remember too much of that character. I do remember she was a bit resistant to the Doctor at first, but then together they were able to work through their problems. And the Daleks kind of tend to do that to you sometimes. The fear makes companions of us all, as mentioned by the first Doctor. But they were able to become sort of friends by the end of that story, and she continued to travel with the Eighth Doctor for several other adventures after that. So, like I said, one of these days I'm going to catch up on all the Big Finish stuff I've missed out on over the years, and definitely do a much better job breaking down the character of Lucy Miller on this show. Another character that I believe is exclusive to Big Finish is Chris. I apologize. This was the best image of this character that I could find. Unfortunately, even during my research, I was quite unable to find any useful information about him. But yeah, like I said, it is entirely on me. I have not listened to all of the Eighth Doctor stories up until now, but yeah, there's way too much Big Finish and way too much Doctor Who media uh, to go through that I don't think one person can know all of it. Uh, so again, I apologize to the fans of this character if those exist, but yeah, one of these days I'm going to do a much better job breaking down this character. Another character that is relatively new to the Eighth Doctor, and I say relatively because well, it is, but the character of Molly O'Sullivan, the last person that the Eighth Doctor mentions during his final scenes, I should say. I believe she played a major role in what is definitely considered one of the best Doctor Who storylines ever told, the Dark Eyes series. I believe she was the again. Don't know much about this character. I did some research, enough for a few lines of on this show, on this episode. But yeah, Molly O'Sullivan. She was born she was born, I believe, on the day that the Titanic sank, if I remember the my research correctly, and she was a bit rebellious. She was a rebellious figure in her own family. She had 7 siblings, and she outlived all of them. She ran away from home, and well, she basically became a voluntary aid detachment during World War I, and she was accidentally thrust into the TARDIS by she was chased by the Daleks in her first encounter with the Eighth Doctor, and she became sort of an unwilling companion of the Doctor, much like Sharon before her, and much like Lucy Miller before her, being chased by the Daleks. And like I said, the Daleks kind of force these types of friendships upon other people. But like I said, the Dark Eyes storyline, which I believe is a four-part story, um, is considered one of the best Doctor Who stories ever told. But again, it's something I haven't got around to listening to at the moment. But like I said, I will get there eventually. Just, not today. Now then, finally, a character I can actually describe in full detail is the character of Cinder, a companion exclusively in novel form, although I do believe she has made several comic book appearances or other adaptations of the book she appears in. The book is called Engines of War, and it's a book I've referenced several times on this show. It's one of my personal favorite Doctor Who novels of all time, and definitely a novel that I'm fully planning to do an entire episode about next month. So stay tuned for that. But yes, Cinder is a human warrior from the Tantalus Spiral on the planet Moldox, which is in the Tantalus Spiral, which was conquered by the Daleks during the last few years of the Time War, and her entire world was ravaged by the Daleks. She lost a lot of friends she knew. She doesn't even remember her own name. People just named her Cinder because she was the last thing found in a burning building as a young child. And yeah, she was a freedom fighter against the Daleks alongside lots of other friends. She joined up with the Doctor when he accidentally crash landed his TARDIS on a patrol of Daleks that was about to exterminate her. And she then joined the War Doctor in finding out certain secrets about the Daleks. She then joined the War Doctor to Gallifrey. She helped him escape. She then saw the horrors that the Time Lords were committing during the last days of the Time War. She then saw, just like the Doctor, they both realized that the Time Lords were beyond saving especially considering that the Time Lords at the time were planning to destroy her own planet with all the people on it just to save themselves from the Daleks. So yeah, they both saw just how far the Time Lords have fallen at that point, and again, spoilers for the book itself, and a major spoiler for next month's episode where we'll be discussing this book. Not next month, but definitely at some point. I forgot I had these things in order. I know exactly what I'm going to do next month, but one of these days I'm going to do an entire episode about Engines of War. But like I said, major spoiler for the book. If you haven't jumped out yet, this is your final warning. If you're planning to read the book or listen to it, and I highly recommend you do, this is your final warning. So yeah, her death in that book is one of the many reasons why when the Doctor finally decided that there is no stopping the Time War so long as both the Time Lords and the Daleks exist, and is the reason why he decided to make the ultimate sacrifice that he did by the end of the war, and that is the reason why he kept saying during the final days of the war. That's the main reason why he started saying no more, and those are actually the final two words of that book in and of itself. So yeah, Cinder is a really great character, and I highly recommend reading the book, or rather listening to the book Engines of War. If you're planning on listening to it, it's narrated by Nicholas Briggs, who is also the voice of the Daleks in the show and on Big Finish. So he's able to actually switch between narrating the book in his own voice and also reading Dalek lines in Dalek voices, a variety of Dalek voices, I should say. And he also has a pretty good impression of John Hurt's The War Doctor. So again, I cannot recommend this book enough. Just as soon as this episode is over, stop whatever it is you're doing, go on Audible, download the book, and listen to it. You will not be disappointed, I promise you. Now, sticking with the War Doctor for a moment, we have to talk about the character Rejoice. Officially, from what I've seen, she's not technically considered a companion of the War Doctor. I don't know who made that decision, because not only she's in my opinion, a companion of the War Doctor, she's one of the better companions of any Doctor ever, especially considering that there are technically two versions of this character. Not to spoil too much away, but she was from the War Doctor's first story on Big Finish, titled Only the Monstrous, with the first episode being titled The Innocent, as you can see right there. But yeah, long story short, the Doctor accidentally crash lands on her planet, and he actually helps her people defend themselves against people who seek to destroy them. And that is about the only thing I can say about the story without spoiling it, because anything else beyond this point should be considered a spoiler and should be taken as such. So the best thing I can say to you is just go on Big Finish and listen to Only the Monstrous. It's only just the first episode. Sorry, just the first story. And if you like it, you can continue on listening to the rest of the War Doctor. The War Doctor, John Hurt himself, was able to record 4 different box sets of War Doctor stories. The last one, they somehow miraculously were able to record it right before John Hurt's tragic passing in 2017. But yeah, all 4 box sets were released later. During that time, and the War Doctor is just great in those stories, and Rejoice is a major part of why I love that episode as much as I do. Now, technically speaking, a character that debuted in that box set, but hasn't actually become a full-on companion until a little bit later into the War Doctor's stories, is the character Cardinal Illystra. Obviously, she's a Time Lord, or rather, I should say, Time Lady Cardinal. And the position of exactly what Cardinals do is something that's a bit murky. But maybe it will be discussed once I eventually do a breakdown of of the Time Lord hierarchy, and what is a cardinal, what is a castellan, what is a anything else. So yeah, I'll save that for another episode at another time. But Cardinal Illystra is in many ways somewhat could be considered the villain, as well as the companion of that story. She's in charge of the war effort, or rather, at least a part of the war effort. She's the one that sent the Doctor on various missions that he did in the previous episode. I mentioned the innocent and just only the monstrous in and of itself. But yeah, she was one of the major players in that batch of War Doctor stories. Now, to the best of my knowledge, there is only one more companion with the War Doctor during the War Doctor Begins series of episodes. But like I said, I haven't quite listened to those yet. I've only so far listened to the very first story featuring the War Doctor. So, like I said, it will be resolved eventually. Now, something I have to mention before we move on to the modern era of the show, something I have to mention here is you have to, if you haven't already, you have to look for the comic book, The Many Lives of Doctor Who. I apologize for the bad quality of the image. It's the only image I was able to find that StreamYard allowed me to upload. But yeah, it features basically this comic book story features one story from each individual Doctor leading up to Jodie Whittaker. I believe it was released around the time when the 13th Doctor was introduced. So there is no story featuring the 13th Doctor, but it basically goes through every single Doctor telling one story from their era, and we also get to see lots of companions and characters coming back. It also covers certain stories that were mentioned by some of the Doctors, but not actually seen on screen. That's the only thing you can see right here. But for one of those Doctors in particular, the War Doctor, that is, we see him traveling with a companion of his, someone by the name of Dorium Maldavar. Obviously, Dorium Maldavar then went on to become a much bigger and more important character during the 11th Doctor's era. But to the best of my knowledge, this is their first encounter together, the War Doctor and Dorium Maldavar. And I won't mention what they do, but if you are a Doctor Who fan, and more specifically a Stephen Moffat fan, Doctor Who, you should have some idea of what the War Doctor and Dorium Maldavar did during this story. Again, no spoilers, but let's move on to the modern era of Doctor Who, starting with the Ninth Doctor. And yes, for those of you wondering, the Ninth Doctor did actually have companions outside of Rose, Mickey, Jackie, and Captain Jack, and well, Adam, I suppose. But yeah, this is part of the Ninth Doctor's first big series of Big Finish stuff. The first time you actually get to see the Ninth Doctor, sorry, Christopher Eccleston as the Ninth Doctor back since his departure from the show. This is the first time we get to see him in Big Finish, the story called Ravagers. Now, again, much like with Jorah in Out of Time, there is no available picture that I could find of the character Nova, which is, technically speaking, his companion in this story. But I decided to bring up this image of the box set called Doctor Who Ravagers, not to be confused with the Ravagers from Doctor Who Phlox, the most recent season of Doctor Who. But for the most part, they are kind of the same. They follow very similar things. They have very similar attributes in this story. But yeah, I highly recommend listening to Ravagers just to see how the Ninth. First of all, it's more stories featuring the Ninth Doctor, which, how can you say no to that? You can see the Ninth Doctor interacting with a companion other than the companions you're familiar with. There's some great action stuff. There's a great wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey storyline in there. And also, this is, technically speaking, the first time, canonically, that is, chronologically, that the Ninth Doctor yells his iconic catchphrase, "Fantastic!" So if you want to hear and there's quite a bit of a build up to that moment in and of itself. But yeah, Ravagers, the first one that I have listened to. The second one I haven't actually got a chance to listen to. I believe it only released fairly recently. I believe it's called Old Enemies, but it does feature the Ninth Doctor encountering Cybermen and also the Brigadier. So highly recommend listening to that one. The next one that we kind of have to talk about, these are two comic book exclusive characters, but in the forms of Gabby Gonzalez and Cindy Wu. Now, I don't know too much about these two. They have only appeared they have appeared in several different comic books alongside the 10th Doctor. This is after Journey's End. It's unclear if it takes place before the next Doctor or Planet of the Dead or anything of the sorts. I believe the time placement places this after the events of Journey's End, when all of the companions have left and Donna had her tragic ending and a departure from the show, sort of. But yeah, the Doctor is traveling with these two characters. I haven't actually read a lot of comic books featuring them, but from what I've read, I was not really much of a fan. Now, again, I've only read like excerpts or certain pages, not actual storylines with them. Was not a fan at first, but I'm willing to go back and read full stories with both of these characters. They've appeared mainly in Titan Comics, just in case you were wondering, not any other company. So Doctor Who, Titan Comics. This is where you'll find these two characters interacting with the 10th Doctor. Now then, finally, a comic book companion that I actually know pretty much all there is to know about, and one of my personal favorite companions, a companion I wish got a live action treatment because it's such a really good one. It's from the 11th Doctor's era, and are you ready for this? Are you ready for this? Say hello to Kevin, the T-Rex. Yes, he is a T-Rex, and he's a companion of the 11th Doctor who traveled with the 11th Doctor and Amy and Rory. Yeah, he first appeared in a storyline called When Worlds Collide. Now, I will say this. The 11th Doctor comic book stories didn't quite start well. The first couple of issues, a bit of a drag, but it really then does pick up with this storyline, which is, I consider it one of my personal favorite Doctor Who storylines ever, particularly featuring the 11th Doctor. But going back to Kevin here for a second, long story short, the Doctor kind of lands in Westworld type of scenario, a planet where androids, I guess it's Westworld without the sex part. It's just the planet is separated into all kinds of locations that fit different environments, like the Old West, like Victorian England, like the Mesozoic era, like certain other time periods from Earth and various other planets, where people can just go there and reenact their favorite moments from history or favorite moments from different stories, with androids performing as characters in those specific stories. Kevin just happens to be one of them, a mild-mannered T-Rex from the era that features the Cretaceous period of Earth, where dinosaurs were arguably at their highest. So, and he's a talking android T-Rex that once, again, no spoilers, but once certain problems with his world happened, he decided to travel with the 11th Doctor, Amy and Rory, before finding a place in the universe where he belongs. So yeah, I love Kevin. He's a mild-mannered T-Rex. He's got all the mannerisms of a distinguished gentleman, but he's a giant T-Rex. So it's so much fun. And if everything I just said about Kevin wasn't enough to intrigue you into reading this storyline, this comic book storyline, When Worlds Collide, if anything I just said about Kevin and the Westworld inspiration, if that wasn't enough to get you hooked and wanting to start reading this comic book right now, Nazi Sontarans. That's all I'm going to say for now. Nazi Sontarans. I really hope that's enough of a motivator to start reading that comic. But moving on to the 12th Doctor. Oh, sorry, not just quite yet. There's one more character from the 11th Doctor era that I would like to point out. The character of Handles, the Cyberman head that appeared exclusively in the time of the Doctor, Matt Smith's final story as the Doctor. Not his final appearance, obviously, but his final story. I would very much like to see a series of stories featuring the 11th Doctor and Handles. I think they would just make such a great comedic duo. I loved Handles in that one episode. And yeah, I would just love to get to know more of Handles and to see more of just the 11th Doctor having these weird, eccentric conversations with this character. To the best of my knowledge, and yes, I did research this a little bit, so far I couldn't find any other story featuring Handles, comic books or otherwise, but I would very much like that. And considering that so far uh, well, the 11th Doctor does have several Big Finish stories with him, just not Matt Smith. Matt Smith did not came back to reprise his character in Big Finish form. Obviously, it's understandable. He's a very busy man. He's a very busy actor. He appears in a multitude of movies at the moment. But it would be nice to get more of the 11th Doctor. Matt Smith himself has stated multiple times that he fully regrets leaving the show when he did, because he really wishes he could come back. Maybe we can see the 11th Doctor back in the 60th anniversary. Maybe we can see some more stories featuring the 11th Doctor taking place before the time of the Doctor. Maybe some stories in between The Angels Take Manhattan and The Snowman. Maybe some stories with the 11th Doctor traveling on his own. Maybe some more stories with Clara. Who knows? But I would just love to see more of the 11th Doctor and Handles, and maybe some more stories with the Paternoster gang, because it will be great to see those guys back. Okay, now moving on to the 12th Doctor. So far, I couldn't find any other companions that travel with the 12th Doctor outside of the TV show, and just like Matt Smith, Peter Capaldi has not yet reprised his role in Big Finish, despite having one of the best voices in the Doctor Who canon, and that's saying something. But yeah, the 12th Doctor does have several short stories with him on Big Finish, just not with Peter Capaldi voicing him. But I gotta mention Ghost Stories, a series of a series of comic books featuring Grant, the character which debuted in The Return of Dr. Mysterio. I just love the idea that Doctor Who basically had a superhero-inspired episode with a character that then went on to become an actual superhero in comic books, in Doctor Who comic books, I should say. And yes, so I believe I have read some of the Ghost stories. The 12th Doctor basically came back several years after his encounter with Grant and Mrs. Lombard, Lucy Lombard, I should say, when her baby was not all grown up, but definitely older than a toddler. And the Doctor kind of needed Grant's help to do some more stuff. And he kind of needed the powers of a superhero to do that. So, yeah, just the idea of the 12th Doctor having a literal superhero as a companion really, really excites me. Now, sadly, I couldn't quite find any companions of the 13th Doctor that haven't appeared on television, obviously because even though the 13th Doctor is currently reaching the end of her tenure as the Doctor, she's still technically very, very, very recent in the Doctor Who canon, comparatively speaking. And as any true hardcore Doctor Who fan knows, even though a doctor is leaving the role, that in no way, shape, or form means that her tenure, or his or her tenure, I should say, as the doctor is over. There are still so many stories to tell. Case in point, where is it? Case in point, this the 10th Doctor and the 4th Doctor having an adventure together. So yeah, even though a doctor has, even though a actor or actress has stepped down from the role of the Doctor, it still doesn't in no way means, no way, shape, or form means that they've left the role forever or for good. They will still continue to make more and more stories featuring the 13th Doctor. Maybe some stories during the excruciatingly long time she was in space prison. I don't know what stories you can tell there, but who knows? I'll leave it up to the Doctor Who creative team to come up with something like that. But yeah, I would love to see more stories featuring the 13th Doctor. And I would definitely like all the more recent Doctors, namely Matt Smith, Peter Capaldi, and Jodie Whittaker, to join the ranks of the Big Finish crew. I believe we are getting more stories featuring the Fugitive Doctor. I suppose I should have pointed this out. I don't know why I didn't, but yeah, the Fugitive Doctor is getting her own series of comic books featuring her. This is the first of which we can see here. I believe it's going to be called Doctor Who Origins or something like that. Yeah, this is a variant cover that I found. Not quite as good as this one, but I definitely enjoyed this variant cover of the Fugitive Doctor right there. So yeah, we are getting more with the Fugitive Doctor. Hopefully, we can get more of the Fugitive Doctor on Big Finish, and like I said, hopefully more with Jodie, Peter, and Matt on Big Finish as well. But the final thing I wanted to talk about today, before we wrap up today's episode, is Doctor Who Prisoners of Time. We can't really talk about and I can't really have an episode mainly focusing on Doctor Who companions without at least bringing up Prisoners of Time, one of the best Doctor Who comic books ever made. It was mainly produced for the 50th anniversary of Doctor Who. That's why it features all the Doctors, minus obviously the 12th, 13th, and War Doctors, because they haven't actually been fully explored at that time yet. But basically, it's a story that heavily focuses on companions of past Doctors, past companions. It also features certain companions meeting each other, and like I said last week, I love it when companions from various Doctors get to meet. Companions that never had a chance to meet each other on screen, I should say. And yeah, it also does feature one, in my opinion, one of the better villains in Doctor Who comics, which really does tie in perfectly with the topic of companions. That's really the best I can say without spoiling it at the moment. I have spoiled quite a lot of stories today on this show, but this is one story I do not intend on spoiling. You just have to read it for yourself, and then you'll know exactly why this storyline ties in perfectly with the topic of Doctor Who companions. So, I believe that's enough. Oops, sorry. I believe that's enough. I believe we've talked about enough companions from this list over here. Right here, you can see several of the ones we've mentioned all throughout this month. We talked about the classic era companions. We talked about the modern era companions. We talked about the more obscure companions. We can see here Strax with Doria Maldavar and Handles. We can see Kevin right there at the very back. You can see him right there at the top left of this image. You can see Kevin, the dinosaur, right there. You can see some of the 8 Doctors companions. There's Stephen Taylor with his mascot Panda Bear. There's some unit guys. There's a pterodactyl for some reason in there. There's a Cyberman person. There's 2 Romanas. Obviously, you gotta bring up the person in the front, Clara Oswald, who's standing right in front of the best companion, Sarah Jane Smith. There's also Leela right in front of her. There's a dog there. There's all kinds of companions. So many different stories to tell, so many different characters to meet. However, that is a story for another time. So yeah, I kind of had to find some way to stick that in there. But yeah, I think I've talked enough about companions all throughout this week. Next week, or rather next episode of this week of the show, I should say, I will be joined by companions of my own for a game featuring Doctor Who quotes, something very similar to the Alien game that we played on this channel on Let's Talk About Star Wars. But yeah, it's a little bit different to fit the format of this show, and hopefully you'll join us because it's going to be quite a lot of fun. And yeah, I can't wait for that. I'm going to be meeting Soda and Ben later tonight, as of the recording of this video, to talk more in detail about that. But that is it from me. Now, if you're more interested on listening to more of what I have to say about Doctor Who and various other stuff, you can also check me out on my channel, 50 Shades of Geek. You can also check me out on this channel. I go live with Soda and Ben on Northern Countdown on Saturdays. Used to be Sundays, but I believe we've decided to move it to Saturdays to make it more accommodating to all three of us. We also have Schmorder Analytics on this channel. We also have You Seen This with Daniel and Snark and sometimes Dave, where they talk about lesser TV shows than Doctor Who. I believe we have Mount Schmodan on this channel. We have Rewind the Tape with Soda and Ben. So they're still going through all the Batman movies leading up to the Batman. You can also check out Ben on his individual channel, The Multiverse of Geekdom. I was there a couple of weeks ago or days ago. I can't remember when this, and I'm not sure when this is going to debut. But I was there discussing my second favorite show of all time, Once Upon a Time. There's all kinds of stuff to check out on this channel and various other channels, and it would mean the world to us if you can subscribe to us and leave a comment down below. So that is all I can say for now. I believe I've talked more than enough about companions I knew at least half of a thing about. And yeah, till the next time, everybody, stay fantastic. Goodbye.